forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank Doyle, who's the Assistant Commissioner for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, to introduce his team and get started on the presentation.
Thank you so much, David. And Sturgios, I know, is very helpful in this as well. So we're really grateful for the assistance of the neighborhood associations to help pull this abutters group together. Had it not been for COVID, we would have begun this process many months ago, but we have been singularly focused, at least in 2020, which slowed the progress of the project quite a bit and also slowed our community outreach. So I will start with that. But we are at an extremely and very exciting juncture in the life of this project. For those of us who have been living it virtually daily for about 3 years now, this is the stage where, called in the architect lingo, design development ends and you move into the construction phase of the project. So it is very timely. Again, we had wished we could have started with the engagement with the abutters and the community earlier, but that was just not possible. The design was not in the place where we could do that. We had all of the staff of the Shattuck involved in the design, and we had limited use of their time during the COVID crisis. That's the basic background on it, just for you to know. So I'll introduce the folks who are on that are members of our team that intend to speak to this evening. The Undersecretary who's been heading up this project from the beginning, many of you have met. She's been on the project since its beginning on behalf of Secretary Sutters. She's been at a lot of meetings, even prior to my joining the team. She will be joining us shortly. She's with the Secretary right now, so she let me know that she will get on as soon as she can. Also with us is Carol Gladstone. Carol is the Commissioner for the Department of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, DCAMM as we refer to it. And DCAMM is, in essence, the state's agency which builds and maintains all of the state's property and buildings, and is in charge of this project at this moment in time throughout construction. Once construction is over, they'll hand the keys to the Department of Public Health and we will run the hospital in 2024. Gordon Wren is joining us. I didn't see his name just at the moment. He is the Director of Design and Construction. He'll also be speaking tonight. He's from DCAMM. Rick Polvino, who you met a minute ago, David, when we were teeing this up. He's the managing principal for SLAM, which is the architect group that has been leading this project again for nearly 3 years. Neil Martin, the design principal for SLAM, is also going to help present tonight. And Jessica Petro, who is the design director for SLAM and for PLA landscape architecture. She'll be speaking a lot to the outside of the building. So what we hoped tonight was to begin our relationship with the community. And I'll get into these objectives in a minute, but I first wanted to ask perhaps Commissioner Gladstone, if you might just give some welcoming remarks and speak to the abutters for us.
Thanks, Frank, thank you. And David, thank you. I want to echo Frank's appreciation for people's attendance tonight. You can probably tell from me, from Undersecretary Peters' involvement, as well as Frank's and our team, this is one of the most important projects that we've got going on for the state. And it's got my attention and Secretary Sutter's attention. So we're really looking forward to working with you, getting this project underway, and I hope you'll appreciate. I think we can make this building a lot better, and I hope you'll see that tonight. So,
thank you, Commissioner, so much, and thank you for your direct involvement. I know you have visited the East Newton several times with us, going through the building, been pointing out every nook and cranny, and bringing all of your experience to the project directly on site. So we very much appreciate all of that direct engagement. So, we want to start tonight, as I mentioned, building a trustful, trusting, respectful, transparent relationship with all of our new neighbors long before we move, which is, as I mentioned, in 2024 right now. We will we envision this meeting, this abutters group, to be a regular ongoing meeting, and we can work on schedule with all of you as far as how frequent you would like it. We also have committed to Blackstone and Worcester Square to have a combined community meeting in May. And now Alexa wants to join me. Let me shut that off. So we'll be planning that for probably later in May for the community-wide meeting for both neighborhood associations, to have a much broader, larger conversation than the direct and more detailed drill down we want to do tonight with abutters and what they'll experience most directly. You know, we have a PowerPoint. It's not a ton of slides. We want to just give you an overview of what the project plan is to date, and we'll be asking Slam to do that in a moment. And then we'll give the whole slide deck first, just to give you the concept overall. And then we'll go back slide by slide, really, and engage with you, listen to your concerns, hear your questions and your suggestions and advice, and take those back. We're hoping to gather them tonight, take them back internally to the team, and give you very effective, efficient, and direct, detailed answers at our next meeting. So that's our hope for tonight, is to get those concerns all registered so that we can begin addressing them. And then, you know, to let you know that this will become, and hopefully beginning tonight, you'll understand and see it and feel it, that this is an ongoing and reliable feedback loop for all of us to engage with on this project. So I think I'd kick it over to Slam now, unless Gordon is on. I didn't see him yet, but
Gordon is on.
I'm here. I'm here.
Mr. Gordon, it's yours to carry now. Gordon will go into the PowerPoint.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen. So this is Rick, and I'm hoping folks can see that.
It's duplicating your screen. You may have to switch your display setting, the top left.
Duplicating my screen.
It's showing your second monitor view.
Oh, the next slide. I see.
Yep. Yeah, if you click on that display setting, it's the top right next to the taskbar.
Yeah. I didn't know. I have 3 screens right now, and I didn't know which one it was showing on.
That should do it. There you go.
All right. Are we all good now?
Good.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. So Frank, I didn't know, you spoke to a lot of these. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about any other objectives.
Yeah, I included 2 or 3 other slides here. It's more background. We don't need to spend time on it. It's kind of the size of the hospital, the services provided, the mission statement, et cetera, in the next couple of slides. I think to give the abutters and all of those engaged tonight more time to discuss, we probably could move directly toward the slides beginning with the site.
Very good.
Is that okay with you, David? And
This is
Yeah, that's totally perfect. And one other thing I just asked, we have over 40 participants. So if people have questions or comments, if they could use the hand raise function or put things in the chat, just so that we're sure to be able to get to everybody in some kind of orderly fashion.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Great. And with that, I'm going to defer to Jessica Petru, who Frank introduced as SLAM's landscape architect, to talk about the site and its current activity.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick and Frank. Just want to reiterate, we're very excited to be here and to have this initial conversation to get you acquainted with this site plan that we're looking at and get your feedback. So I'm going to just give context and the overview of the site, and we're going to just walk through some of the key components. And as we go through this PowerPoint, you'll see some renderings of some of these spaces, which will help to kind of paint that picture a little bit more than just in plan view as we're seeing it. So on the slide, you'll see East Newton bounding the bottom of the slide, indicating the one-way circulation off of Albany. And then at the top of the slide is East Brookline Street with the one-way circulation in the opposite direction. So how I'm going to move through the site, it would be as if I was turning down from Albany onto East Newton Street, coming into the site. So as you can see from the front part of that entrance drive, this is the existing entry and exit onto East Newton of this front drive that we're utilizing, but we're changing that front space in the sense that we have a large center green space as part of the frontage. As I know you're all well aware of, right now it's all pavilion or hardscape and plaza that incorporates a drive, whereas now we'll have a large green space as part of the frontage of this street. So this main entrance here is taking the circulation of visitors, any sort of staff entry, and other users off of East Newton into the main entrance of the hospital there, as you see labeled. There are parking spaces noted for the visitors, as well as additional cars that are needed for support services. And we also note an area called an ambulance bay. So that's not a traditional emergency ambulance. It's more of a transport area, but we've noted it as such to look into the driving requirements and turning radiuses that it accommodates an ambulance for transport. So within this main pavilion, once you exit the loop drive, coming down onto East Newton and taking a right, and you pass the rest of the frontage of the building along East Newton, there's an existing drive that was used before for ambulance, and we've noted it as the corrections entrance into the hospital. So the van transport will unload at this area that says Corrections Sallyport. And then if you continue page north, going towards East Brookline along the backside of the building, the van will have an internal drive access, which will wrap around the building along the area that notes Fire Lane Alley. And that is just to have access to the parking spaces, the angled parking spaces by the loading dock. So within that area of the angled parking spaces, we have our existing loading dock, as well as we've called out some of the utility needs of the hospital that you'll see there's an area called Equipment Yard. So when we go into our rendered views, you'll be able to see some of these spaces take shape a little bit more. Go to the next slide.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, I'm Neil Martin, and I'm just going to show some exterior images here. This is a big part of your neighborhood, and we're very sensitive to the building they're about to refresh. To the upper right, you're seeing the existing condition of the current Newton Pavilion. As you folks know well, it's quite a big monolith. Currently, it's rather cold, it's dark, and has glass that you can see that is actually black glass. You'll also notice, and you can see this when you walk through the neighborhood, that it has openings in it that are sort of blank openings or just black openings. What we're proposing is to create a building, to refresh that building so that it has a human scale, so that it has a base, a middle, a top, a building that's meant for people who enter and come by this building. The color in particular we're looking at is a sense of a warm metal that you're seeing at the middle part of the building, and also a nice warm stone at the base. It's all about the human experience with this building. The glass that you saw in the upper right corner is all transformed to a clear glass so that you can see and be seen into the plaza that's there at the lower left. Next slide, please.
Neil, if I can just add just a component of what the landscape is trying to kind of reinforce with the moves that we were doing for the facade is we're looking to have a center green space that is in scale with the proportion of the building. So we'd like to create a space that's open, meaning it has clear, visible sight lines. It's easy to see into and around the space. It has an intuitive wayfinding with that one-way circulation loop. And we're trying to respond to the idea of having more contextual feeling towards the street in the community, having this large, green space in front of the hospital that's inviting. So just want to make sure we added those points too. Sorry, Neil.
No, that's great. I think it's
Okay.
great insight. You and I are team members. The one thing we like to do is look at our buildings at night. And part of that is when you think about being in your neighborhood, taking a walk through the evening where we see a plaza that has warm, safe light. And again, that see and be seen through the public space is all about creating a sense of security for you folks and for the neighborhood. You'll see also that in the evening, we have this sort of the blank spaces you saw before in that open corner that were black. We sort of have an artistic feature that's there as well that is backlit. And a lot of the skin throughout the entire sort of building is about creating a sense of craft and dignity for the folks who are working here, for their patients as well, and for the professionals who are here also. Jessica, any thoughts here as well?
Well, thank you. The other thing I just wanted to note is you'll see a lot of the lighting does come from the building, but then we're also looking into additional accent lighting where you'll see a next rendering that shows within the center green space, there's a soft ellipse wall. And within that wall, it'll have a recessed light. So it'll have this kind of low soft glow at the scale of the planting, as well as looking at ways to include lighting within handrails and such. So we're trying to think about the layering of light in the correct manner and making sure we're meeting the adequate or the desired lighting level, but then also supplementing it with the right kind of textures and planting palette so that they're low and neat or clean plants within here, uniform plants.
And while we're here, we should also mention that the project also includes an elevated terrace that you see in the upper right for folks in the hospital who need to get out in fresh air and be in a secure environment. We included that upper terrace in this view as well. Next slide. So one of the most important parts of this project is the use of public transportation. A lot of folks, or not all of them, will be using the MBTA bus and train lines to get here. And we've in particularly moved the existing bus stop there to be under the canopy and beacon that's there to the left, so that folks are protected there as well. And we think this is a resource also naturally to the neighborhood as you need to connect with the other parts of the city. The plaza itself, you can begin to see what Jessica had mentioned, part of the entire sort of fabric being, again, clear and open and secure, and also the transformation of the glazing so that it is no longer a black sort of thing, but engaged with this plaza we're creating for this space. One of the things that we believe in for this project is the sense of craft also continues, fully around the building. And here we're seeing the beginnings of the view from the alley that's there. We're looking to transform the building here as well by creating a skin that lowers the sense of scale, using materials that are brownish red in their sense of color, so they begin to reflect on, in some ways, on the townhouses that are there, their homes, and keeping the existing trees and lighting, retaining those existing trees and creating soft lighting so that that security, the sense of security, is also included in the alley itself. Jessica, any thoughts here?
Just to add also with thinking with this back circulation and alley, I know we'll discuss, show a slide in the deck a little bit further, just talks a little bit about phasing, but something to note, we're looking to have the alley will be repaved at the end of the construction, as well as the cleaning of that raised planter wall. So just trying to think about some of the context of this view and what we were trying to achieve with showing you this here.
And next slide, please. So the other view from the alley is super important to us. Again, this is actually looking down towards the back gardens that you folks own, and you can see that the sense of craft of the building that you saw at the front plaza wraps its way around to the alley. What's critical here is that you'll see no vehicles during the evening hours, and the proposal is to leave those parking spots unoccupied. So there's quiet that's there during those evening hours, and then the light as well is secure and provides a secure and safe environment. To the left, you're seeing an enclosure screen for some of the system that goes right up against the BU dental school that's required for the infrastructure of the project. And here we're providing soft downlight again along that edge so that the security is there, especially during the evening hours. We want to make sure that you folks as neighbors get the sense that the craft, the security, and the sensitivity to you folks is critically on our mind. Thank you.
So thanks, Neil and Jessica. As the designers walked around the building and did a full transformation, just talk real briefly about the delivery and the timing of delivery. This project will be constructed in phases. Phases 1, 2, and 3, as shown here. Phase 1 is a lot of site work, as you see in that light gold color. That will be starting this summer in July of 21. That's our target. So everything that you see, all the scope that you see in these dashed lines will be part of that work. So it's the demolition and utilities work for that. Phase 2 is what we're identifying. That's probably most interest to you folks is the back alley, the fire lane in the alley. There are utilities and other infrastructure that's required to support the design. That is anticipated to start in the fall timeframe of October of this year. And then phase 3 is the rest of the project, if you will. It'll be the envelope of the building, as Neil mentioned, reskinning the building and all the interior fit up to make it the 21st century healing environment. And just a quick snapshot of the overall project schedule. So we talked about pretty much these three, if you will, 3 or 4 first phases starting in July with the interior demo and the phase 1, if you will, site utilities. That phase 2 is the alley work that's occurring in October. And then the phase 3 is the construction or the reskinning, if you will, of the existing facade. And then the project, there's a lot of activity that occurs starting since July of this year. So spring of 22, we'll start the interior renovation, and the anticipation is to be complete with building construction, what we call substantial complete, by late 23, early 24. Then there's some commissioning and some enabling work to get prepared for when the actual folks move in, which will be spring to summer of 2024. So that we have a lot of road in front of us, but we feel as if we can get there, and we're excited to be part of the process, as mentioned earlier. Oops. So with that, it was a short deck. This was meant just to give you an overview of a project overview, but the intent is to start a dialogue and to hear any questions you may have.
So two things. First of all, and I think Frank just put this in the chat. This deck will be available to anyone who wants it, and we'll also put it on our website so it's accessible. Patrick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I just had a couple of questions that I'd love to hear hear your thinking on. So right now, or when the hospital was part of Boston University, it did also facilitate corrections, and the corrections vehicles parked in what was at the time known as the H lot, which is at the end of the alley by on kind of on the what is it, the Harrison Ave side. Why wouldn't you continue, up on the left-hand corner? Why wouldn't they continue to park there versus down where there's currently quote unquote green space? And then you would also mention that parking would be off limits at night. What's the plan to enforce that?
So if I might just offer, and then please DCAMM team jump in, but the lot that you're referring to, Patrick, is still owned by Boston Medical Center, and they've retained ownership. We do not own that lot that you're referring to. We have an easement just to get out that alleyway in the case of an emergency out onto East Brookline. It is not the intent to use that easement for any regular traffic, but to use the alleyway instead. So we don't have that available to us. They're still using those other buildings that they own in the quadrangle there, and they're going to maintain that parking lot.
And then what about the so concur with that, is the lot to the left of the Sally Port, but behind the Preston family building, is that also?
Yeah, if you can see the kind of dotted line, the black dotted line, that's our property line. So
and then
we don't do anything outside of that.
I think somebody had indicated that parking in that area by the loading dock would be off limits at night, but traditionally if somebody sees a parking space, they're going to park there. So what's the enforcement there? And then even during the day, what's the enforcement on idling?
So idling is not allowed, not by the state vehicles, not by regulation or by statute. So
I would just say that there's a sign there now that says no idling, and vehicles still idle there.
Right, but they're not our employees.
No, I understand that, but my point is more that saying it's not allowed doesn't enforce it.
Well, there'll be signage, and I wanted to let all of you know that there are extensive security cameras being installed as well. We don't show them on the site plan yet because the fixtures are not set yet. We're reviewing it both with the Department of Corrections because they have security needs for cameras around the entire property, as well as the Department of Public Health and the Department of Mental Health. So the design team is working on that, and we'll bring that back to you when that gets more solidified. They'll be monitored 24/7. There will be a campus police force on site, as we do have in Jamaica Plain now. And as a state property, both in Jamaica Plain and the future at East Newton, we are secured by the state police force. They have jurisdiction. So state police will be monitoring the area. We haven't worked out with the state police what the frequency will be on site. They have had a patrol car at Jamaica Plain. So that's the real basic introduction to the building. I don't have enough to give you a lot tonight, Patrick, but that's the intent. So, just to answer your direct question about idling and who's watching the idling, there are security cameras in that area that are being monitored by the Department of Corrections. So their staff have to comply with their regulations and with the statute. And if we have complaints from the neighbors that they're not complying, we will certainly act immediately on it. We'll back on the tape and see who left their car idling. The expectation is the officers, because they will be empty transport vans, and they're just passenger vans, really. When they are sitting there, It is the expectation while the patients are being taken care of in the hospital that the officers will go into the hospital and get a bite to eat at the cafeteria or the coffee shop or whatever, but not maintain an idling van and be sitting in the van waiting for 2 hours for their patients to come back out.
So I'll just go on the record as an abutter, just saying that I don't love the idea of removing that green space and paving it over without replacing it someplace else in some fashion.
Thank you. That's the purpose of tonight, is to listen to, and I have heard from other abutters who have the same concern. As I said, we're looking to take most of this in tonight to see if we can address any of the concerns. If there are other ways to do it, we just wanted to present to you where the project is at tonight.
Yeah, excuse me, my name is Mark. I'm also an abutter. And in the early part of your presentation, you talked about the human experience and inviting green spaces. That's really not giving the abutters much comfort in terms of you taking away what has been a nice green space and a buffer to the hospital and the buildings that we abut.
Thank you, Mark.
So just sort of, and all this talk about crafting dignity and, for patients and staff, I think there needs to be a little bit more attention paid to the abutters and their concern.
I'd have to agree as one of the abutters as well on East Brookline Street. I agree with what Mark was saying and agree. This is Dave Megardician. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'd have to agree. I appreciate the presentation tonight, and I'm just as a little bit of background. I'm a longtime resident in the area, a BU medical student, a BU Boston Medical Center emergency medicine resident. I worked at East Newton as a student and as a resident. I worked at the Menino campus. I have a strong connection to the area, and I'm happy that this facility is going to continue to provide care to patients in our city who are definitely in need of that. But I think there is a little bit of a discrepancy in what was being presented by Jessica in terms of highlighting the great green space that's being added to the facility in the front, where the neighborhood is really not interfacing with the actual hospital, and removing that green space that has been actually, as Mark and others have mentioned, a buffer between the sort of industrial and component of the hospital and the actual residential component of the rest of the neighborhood. And I agree with what's already been raised tonight. As an ER doctor, I'll be perfectly frank in terms of saying that despite outside of our emergency departments at every place that I've worked, it says no idling, and those vans, those ambulances are consistently idling, and I worry that that's going to continue to be the case despite signage, despite cameras. And I don't think it's going to be something that, if we're reaching out to the state police, that it's going to be a high priority for the state police to deal with the exhaust and pollution and noise pollution that we in the community are going to be dealing with this new parking area. So my suggestion, because I never like to complain without making a suggestion, is we as a community can try and work with the designers to find an alternative space for this parking area. I see this great redesign in the front that could also be alternatively turned into a parking area and not interfere with the sort of piece that we as residents on East Brookline Street would want to continue to maintain. And I know there's alternative options that we can look at in the neighborhood where these vehicles could park during the day. And this doesn't even sort of address concerns that may come at nighttime with these open spaces. So I'll just leave it at that and let others speak. But I'm happy to reach out as part of the community and work with you guys to find alternatives that could be mutually acceptable to both the abutters as well as the Shattuck, so that everyone can find a good answer for this.
Thank you very much for your
Thanks.
comments. We'll put them into the discussion for the next meeting when we take all of that, talk about it as the team, and come back and discuss particulars with you. I want to cover everything tonight if we could. So who next has their hand up?
Joel, I think is next, and then Angela.
Okay, hi, my name is Joel. I'm also in a butter. A couple different questions. Is the corrections Sally Port expected to be a 24-hour drop-off?
No, the corrections department arrives around 7:30 in the morning with prisoner patients who have to be brought in, obviously cleared through security, brought to holding until they go to either an ambulatory appointment or they're going to be brought in for inpatient. They then usually, as I talked to DOC about this after the last Blackstone meeting, because that question was asked then as well. I think it was by Desi or someone else, but they really have their last transport leave between 4 and 4:30 in the afternoon so that they have time to get the prisoners back to the prisons in time for dinner and night close up, if you will. So they really operate those vans between around 7:30 and 4:30 in the afternoon.
Okay, the next question, as we move around to the back of the building, the fire lane and the alley, what and I think the next slide or the next a few slides ahead shows it better. What is there any plan yet for what those windows will overlook? Sorry, for what? Yeah, not that one.
Hold on. There we go.
Those windows there.
What will be in those windows?
So Rick or Jessica or
Yep. So those will be patient rooms up here, not too dissimilar to what was there prior. So on this face and this face.
All of it will be patient rooms?
Correct. And each patient room will have a window treatment with blinds, obviously.
Okay. And
so we are just to clear up any question you may have. All of those windows are currently in existence. We are not adding or subtracting windows in that area, are we, Rick?
No, correct. That's correct.
are they set windows or are they able to be opened?
They're all set.
They're all set. Okay. And the alley, I know I'm kind of jumping around a lot of areas here, but the alley repaving, there's also a major issue with water. Will it be regraded or just repaved? The water pools there when it rains and it's continually.
So all of this will be milled. It's called milled. It'll take the top coat off down to the binder, and then a new top coat will be installed.
Yeah,
so your potholes will eventually be fixed.
But there are drainage issues as well, I believe.
Those will be taken care of as well, because that's why we're doing so much work in this. A lot of the utilities and drainage has been foreseen.
And then just one final question. In the event of a breach or an escaped patient, is there going to be some sort of alarm that goes off 24 hours? Is there going to be fencing, surrounding the property?
No, the design is as you've seen it presented tonight. There's no additional fencing being added or anything like that. I didn't quite understand what you meant by alarms.
If one of the patients were to escape or as they're being dropped off, run or something like that, is there some sort of enclosure, or would there be like an alarm that goes off notifying the police,
So I'll take that in as a question for us to delve into. I'd like to think, and with your consent, obviously, if this is where you'd like to go, but maybe at the next meeting, we could have the House of Corrections and Department of Corrections folks on the call so that they can tell you what their security measures are. There is no discussion that I've had to date, I don't think, but I don't want to misrepresent anything either. That's why I'd rather kick it to them. But there's no external alarm, it's internal. The prisoners are escorted the entire time that they're on the property or in the property, unless they are in the locked cell units. There are a total of 31 of those cells on 3 different floors in the H building, which is the building that runs off of East Newton back to the alley, the older brick part of the building of the East Newton Pavilion. It was the original part, really, before the quadrangle was added. They call it Q building. So that whole area along that side, that will be the corrections unit. And they will have everything from their holding cells up into their inpatient floors. And we'll go through the interior with you at another meeting. We want to make sure we get through the site first to show you the external that'd be most impacting others. But we'll be happy to show all of that as well.
Just to add some more commentary, as Jessica mentioned, as the correction vans drop off in the Sally Port, there is a program of 3 queued vans here. The first in the queue outside the Sally Port will have an enclosed fence. In other words, you drive your van into the fence. The doors haven't opened yet in the van. The fence would be secured. So it'd be a 6-sided fence, if you will. So everything will be secured. Then the garage door opens in the Sally Port, in the southern portion of the Sally Port. The van pulls in. Meanwhile, the northern portion of the Sally Port garage door is closed. So the van will pull in. So far it's a totally enclosed environment. Then the garage door will close behind them. And within the Sally Port, it'll be a secured space, if you will. And the only access out of that space would be back into the building, or at least controlled access, let's just say. So there is a sequence, there's a security sequence to enter that Sally Port. Just wanted to add that commentary.
Angela?
Yeah, so to sort of echo the sentiments of my fellow abutters, I have some concerns about the parking spaces, because of course I look right out over that area. So how many parking spaces are there?
There's 10.
We're talking 10 parking spots. Okay. You know, I too am concerned about we're adding green space and then removing it from a significant part of our lives here as abutters. So I just want to voice that concern. And I, along with David, am happy to try to work out a way to relocate those spaces if we're talking 10 spaces, because I think in just real world human behavior, you're going to have people that will idle there and that will park there when they shouldn't park there. So that's a real concern. The other thing is just as we were just recently speaking about, with the transfer of people in the correction system, I'm a little concerned that there's not a worst case scenario. Like, yeah, that's everything. If this all goes to plan, that's great. But worst case, someone escapes. I want to hear a plan. How will we be, as abutters, we're right there. So how will we be notified? I think those are things to discuss. Yeah, best case, it all works perfectly here on paper, but worse, the world doesn't work that way. So I think that's something that we'd be happy to discuss or want to discuss in the future. But I do want to just express my concerns about these parking spots and the removal of green space, and wanted to voice that.
Thank you very much. And, I will add those comments to the questions we will bring back the Department of Corrections to directly respond to with regard to what happens with their patients while they're there, how they're guarded, what happens in the case of someone trying to leave the property.
May I speak next?
Certainly, Cinda.
I don't have that hand, whatever it is that requires you to be recognized. I apologize, David.
That's okay. You've got the floor.
Okay, I was at the JP Zoom meeting, and one of the things that was brought out that there was going to be this effort to reduce parking areas and increase landscape area. I think you're creating a toxic environment behind our houses. I know that Frank talked about at the Blackstone Franklin meeting how nice the entrance or the plaza was going to be to the Shattuck, and there would be limited parking and there were not going to be any transport vans. And then as he continued to explain the design route and the delivery process for the Department of Correction outpatients receiving services, I was just really alarmed by the fact that, as he said, these vans would then come down the alley in the back, and that the landscaped area along the side of the loading dock, which is only 50 feet from the back of our houses on East Brookline Street, will be developed as parking area, and it would be designated for the transport vans and drivers as a waiting place. And this is until the client's appointments are finished. And he also stated as well that he expected no changes to this design. I don't think there's been any outreach to the abutters down here on East Brookline Street, giving us an opportunity to weigh in on this proposed parking plan. And I can tell you that any resident that I spoke with and told them what the plans were, and even residents who live across the street. I mean, we are a community down here, and I think we take a lot of pride in our street. And when I even mentioned the fact that behind our houses, there was going to be this proposed parking space, that this green space was going to be eliminated, they were adamantly against it. I mean, in one case, I just got out the word parking and the person was opposed to it. And so, you know, over the many years, you know, I've lived here for a long time. We've been subject to the exhaust fumes and the noise from the tractor trailer trucks that were delivering the supplies to Boston Medical Center's loading dock when BMC owned the property. And even with signs posted indicating no idling of engines, on cold days and hot days, many of the drivers did not adhere to it. And if you approach a driver, and I've done this, these drivers would get angry that I would take it upon myself to say, you know, this is very noisy. The exhaust is going down the back of the alley. Would you please adhere to the sign? They don't adhere to the sign. The sign is meaningless. And also,
my parking spot, I think, is around here.
I'm sorry, what? Can I finish? May I finish, David?
Yes, go ahead, and I'll try to put that person on mute.
Okay, and I've seen those vans and these big tractor trailers come in, and the noise they make, and they swing around, and the exhaust is just terrible. So that when the Shattuck is finally operating, we're going to be subject once again to the noise and the fumes from the Shattuck's delivery to the loading dock. And these deliveries, they're going to be compounded by these transport vans that are going to be stationed at this designated waiting area. And Frank, you know, I looked over the tape today, and Frank said there's going to be approximately 15 transports daily. And he said at the peak, it would be 24 Department of Correction clients coming in. I don't have issues with people getting medical help, regardless of whether they're Department of Correction or whatever. But what I do object to is that this is going to be an ongoing situation daily. Them coming in and out, turning on their transports, turning them off, pulling out, pulling away from. It's just not fair. We've already been subjected to the unhealthy situation that was created, and we're stuck with it, that loading dock. And I just think about this. Here's this hospital with the intent of taking care of the sick, the Shattuck, taking care of the sick, and yet they're proposing a waiting area 50 feet behind our houses, along with the truck delivery to its loading dock, which will create an unhealthy environment, the fumes and the noise for our East Brookline Street community. I'm just perplexed by the proposal and by the absurdity of it. And to hear there's going to be actually 10 spaces, this is outrageous. And another thing is, we want it to remain as a green space. We want it to be a soft transition between our houses and the loading dock. And I have a question to ask, and I want it answered, if you don't mind. I really want this answered. Did any of you even look over at our houses when you were considering taking this park, this nice green area, which it does need work on at this point, and saying to yourself, well, gee, what impact are we going to have on this community down here? They're already having to deal with the loading dock. And now we're going to have this parking lot behind their houses, which is going to cause more noise, more fumes, and then to say that it's going to be monitored. Oh, yes, maybe it's not going to work. And there is going to be idling. And who knows who's going to be parking behind that area when no one is out there or monitoring it. It just is unfair. I have no issue with you coming in as a hospital. I have no issue that you're helping people who need help. I just don't think it's fair. And I think you should reconsider and at least accept the fact and reward us somehow with the fact that, okay, this community is cooperating with you. These abutters are cooperating with you. We're just asking for this one little area to be not disturbed in such a way that it has adverse conditions on us. Did you consider the impact of this parking area on us? And then I just want to say a couple of other things, and then I just think this is important too. As you start your project in terms of your construction, the couple of things I need to clear up here. Is Frank still going to be our contact person once DCAMM comes in? My understanding is that DCAMM, which is the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, is currently in control of that property and will own East Newton Pavilion until construction is finished and then DPH moves in. If Frank is our contact person, fine. But if there is another person as a result of the pavilion being owned by DCAMM, who is that person, and what's the contact information for that person? Another thing, going down the list, because I've been around construction for over 40 years down in this area, so I just want to say a couple of other things. If you're going to redo the mechanicals for that building, and I'm not sure what this equipment yard means, but if you're going to redo mechanicals, please put, if you're going to put new mechanicals on the roof, please put them on the side of East Newton Street. Do not have them on the side of East Brookline Street, because we already have enough noise in there. And also as well, we really do need a construction plan from you. In the old days, it was called a cooperation agreement. We need to know your hours and your days that you plan to work. Another thing I want to say is this, is that when you start construction, and I understand that that last time I voiced this with someone who's going to be paramount in terms of operating this project, I said, you know, it would be very nice if you don't allow your construction vehicles, tell them not to park on East Brookline Street, because we need that for our own parking. And also, if you're going to break up that loading dock, there's cement back there. Our houses have already experienced a lot of stress with all the construction that has gone on in my house. I mean, I know that these houses have been shaken. If you're going to break it up, figure out a delicate way in such a way that it doesn't cause a lot of vibration for our houses. And I want to go back to my last question, and then I will, then someone else can take over. Who considered or did you not consider the impact of this parking of 10 spaces behind our houses? Were we not considered? Because it is a dreadful part of your plan.
So Frank, can you start with that question and then we'll work through Cinda's other questions?
I had started talking and I was on mute. So thank you, Cinda, for listing all of the items. A number of them you've spoken with me before about. I've always brought them back to the team so that you know that. And we have considered every one of them as we have moved forward with this. You know, just a couple of quick reactions, and then I'll just take the rest of it in and present at the next meeting a little more response. But of course, we considered what impact our entire operations were going to have in our neighborhood, our new neighborhood. We do have an obligation because we do serve. I know a lot of people have spoken about being supportive of the patients that we serve, but we have to get the patients that we serve to our building. There's not a lot of places, as you can understand. We're moving from a location in Jamaica Plain that has 300 parking spaces, so it was never a consideration. And we have a much tighter footprint here, and we're doing our very best to limit the number of vehicles that would be parked on any of our spaces. There's only a handful in front in the plaza area. They're basically campus police vehicle will be there. Some immediate drop-offs or pickups, but that's not going to be permanent parking in the front ellipse, if you will. And we have these vans, and there's no place else for them to go. And DOC and the HOCs are our clients, and they bring these patients to us who are very much in need of our care. And so we're doing the best we can to balance. It's not to say that we're not going to listen to what you've said and incorporate what you've said and try and see if there's some way to address it. A number of people have said that work with us tonight and would like to work with everyone to try and find solutions to the problems that are being raised. But this is a very tough one for us to find a different solution for. I just wanted to state that up front.
But there
Okay,
are, but
Cinda,
one thing, there
Cinda-
are other parking spaces available around that area. There's a doctor's office building. There's other public places. You can contract with them to eliminate this problem for us.
Yes.
Are also existing parking spaces in front of the Naval Blood Bank. Why are those not indicated as parking here? They're indicated as just more pavement?
So that area is still under discussion with BMC as far as what the permanent ownership over that area behind the Naval Blood Bank. You do make a valid point there. There were parking spaces there. There've been cars parked there forever. Because I was at East New, I worked for Boston Medical Center for 20 years, and there were always cars parked there. And there's always cars parked down in the other open space lot that we talked about at the other end of the alley. So, and then of course, all of the owners that park in back of their own houses. So there's a lot of parked cars in this area and have been for a very, very long period of time. We're not introducing parked cars for the first time, but you know, we'll
So
do it.
I tend to disagree with you because those cars are parked. They are not idling.
These are not either.
Well, these will definitely be idling.
They will.
Can all agree on that. In the winter,
They're
people
not
will
allowed
want
to.
to get warm in their cars and they will want to be cool in the summer. So that has been an ongoing problem with the ambulances. So I think we can all agree that we will see idling. And I honestly believe that from the start of this project, there has been little to no community engagement. And if you are going to start building a hospital, you should have community engagement, and you should offer the community something, a compromise. And taking away the green space is not an option, okay? You can find a place to park 10 vans without taking away green space, which that is critical to this community.
As I've said, you know, we welcome working with you. We're engaging now and we'll be engaged for the 3 years that this project will be ongoing. And we hope that you'll engage with us and try and help us find solutions to the issues that are being raised. We will do our
So
best.
this is Marie. Can I talk? I'm sorry, Frank.
Yeah, you can. And can I just can people, you just did, but can other people be sure to identify themselves when they start to speak?
Sure. I'm sorry, Frank, for interrupting, but
No, go right
I
ahead.
think you're getting the idea that that green space is, it's just more than a little park. It's a buffer, it's a screen, and now it's not a screen because it looks horrible. But what it did was it was a barrier that provided a residential zone or residential homes, from an institutional hospital campus or something. And so I guess what you're not getting is that with this design, you're taking away this parking, this green space, and you're imposing the functions of your hospital on us now. Now we have to deal with it, and it's really not okay. And I think you're going to get a lot of pushback about this. There are other options. Perhaps talk to BMC about that lot, H lot, rent that space, rent spaces, the bio building, right? There are other issues. And also too, another point is that, so those parking spaces are going to protrude farther towards Albany Street than the loading dock. And since we all live here, we know that that's not going to work. The way that loading dock works is that these big trucks use that space, and then they back up into it. So it's not a functional design anyway. It's not functional, and it's not also, you guys are always saying we need green space. We need the health of the residents. We care about it. And then you're just doing the opposite. And Frank, your attitude is like, this is a done deal. And I think maybe you're beginning to realize this is not a done deal. This is a bad design. And you got to think about, you have to rethink this because it's really a bad design.
Thanks, Marie. That's the purpose of tonight, is to hear from everyone. I didn't intend to state that. My intention was to state that we haven't been able to find a solution. That this is the best design that we could come up with the problem that we have as far as making space available that is required by the Department of Corrections of us. So we're just doing our best too, and would like to engage with you. And as I said, we'll bring the HOC, DOCs in as well. And we'll continue to investigate it.
Frank, can I ask a question about the parking that I don't think's been addressed yet? Are you planning to make any changes to the lighting that is either there or not there at present?
So there are plans. Rick?
Sure, I'm off mute. Yes, we do plan to enhance the lighting here. It'll be down lights, so it won't be a spread light or a floodlight. It'll be down lights to light the space.
And can you sort of define what enhance means?
It'll be upgraded LED fixtures, like I said, with a cowl, if you will, or a container that forces the light in one direction versus what's there now.
Is there lighting there now? And I live at the other end of the street, so I don't tend to see it at night.
There is some lighting there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a question for residents too. If anyone does.
And a lot of it.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a view on the abutter side as to that issue?
There are lights now. There are lights in the green area, but not beyond it.
Okay.
These light poles that you can kind of see up against the ramp wall, if you will, there's two there. Those also go down the alley, but then they are on top of the wall when the alley shrinks, where that wall protrudes out into the alley. We had a problem with getting to the on switch for a while, which was tough, but we've solved that now. So they're there, yeah.
Can I ask two other questions that Cinda raised, which were good ones? First of all, are you going to be the contact going forward?
So at this time I am, but there will obviously be construction teams coming in, David, and they'll have an on-site, I believe they call it construction supervisor. We will have more presence there. As I mentioned to you before, we really don't have any state employees in that building now. We have, I think, a couple of maintenance people and one manager in there. But once the construction begins shortly, there will be more people that are state employees there. We'll work through, I will continue to be the contact and point person so that you have one sole point of contact, but there will be others that will be able to speak as well with the abutters.
Okay. When the Harrison Albany block was constructed, which is the very large residential building on East Canton Street, one of the things that worked well, I think, was that the construction supervisor was available to everybody. Everybody had his email. Everybody had his cell phone, and that made it easier to deal with issues as they cropped up. In addition to having somebody who was the equivalent of you.
Yeah, I would expect that's what we'll have, David, but I don't want to state that we have it yet because we have not had a construction supervisor assigned, and I don't have a job description. I actually asked for one for the job description for the construction supervisor, but Gilbane is the construction company, and we just don't have that yet. But we expect that we will have a similar situation any soon.
Let me ask another of Cinda's questions, which I hadn't heard addressed before, which is the mechanicals on the roof and where those will be located and what noise impacts people should or should not expect.
Yep.
Let's try to find the right spot. A lot of the equipment will be enclosed. So you can see some of the mechanical equipment we're utilizing the roof deck up top. It's kind of hard to describe, but they're mechanical penthouses, if you will. As far as there also will be equipment over here on the roof on building H in the northwest corner. And you can see the equipment yard here. We have electrical and oxygen farm as well over here. But as far as noise, it won't be anything different if not reduced from what how BMC was operating at the time.
I guess as a follow-up to that, Rick, this is David Megardichin again. I was going to actually ask that specific, this equipment yard concerns me because in the renderings, it looks like this equipment yard is actually at street level and not elevated, directing sort of noise more towards the sky as opposed to directing noise outward into this now vacant space where the buffer, the trees, the green space is now being eliminated. So now what I'm seeing is now three issues for us who are abutters. One is the parking pollution and noise. Two is the loading dock, which I just pose one other sort of subset question as a prior issue we've had with BMC was that loading dock being utilized at all hours of the night to the point where there was finally an agreement where there was a gate that was closed during the evening hours to prevent the drop-offs and deliveries at 2 in the morning and the sort of beeping noise of a large semi-tractor trailer backing up. So I wonder if that is also in the works to prevent that sort of noise pollution. And then three, just about the equipment that David had mentioned. Now with this equipment yard, it seems like now there's another added noise pollution that's going to be emanating from this area and directed right at the back sides of our residencies.
So Rick, do you want to address the noise of the equipment yard area and what would emanate from there or not emanate?
Absolutely nothing will. This is electrical switchgear, which is protected by firewalls around it. This is a emergency generator fuel tank, again, protected by emergency fire protection walls around it. And this is the oxygen farm, each of which make zero noise during operation.
And if I could just add to that also, in front of the equipment yard, you'll see some squares of green, and that shows areas of opportunity for additional planting as a buffer. So I just want to note that we're trying to balance these opportunities with also understanding security and visibility in these spaces.
Thanks, Jessica.
And I would add also that the enclosure is an acoustical enclosure that's corrugated in nature.
Somebody's asking in the chat if you could speak to exactly where the dumpsters and trash facilities will be located.
So that hasn't changed from where BMC had it. So there's a compactor. I don't have all the plans, but there's a compactor right here. So within the building, they go to the loading dock, they dump into the compactor. The big rig will come off of Albany, back up, pick up the compactor and leave, similar to what was done during BMC.
Another person is asking someone to speak to concerns around the backup signals that will be on the Department of Corrections vans. I presume they have backup signals.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. I assume so as well, David, but we'll take that into the bucket that we're going to get answers from the DOC from.
Speaking of DOC, let me ask a different question, and we can come back to the parking if anyone else wants to speak to it. But on the Sallyport, someone addressed earlier the fact that this is a fully enclosed facility, if you will, or part of the structure, and that speaks, that goes to security concerns around having prisoners coming in and out of the vans. But one impact of that, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but we should just make clear for people, that will no longer be a passageway that's accessible for pedestrians at any time during the day or night. That currently it's a cut through from East Brookline Street to East Newton Street or vice versa, especially for BMC and BU employees. And that's going to end, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And when is that going to end in terms of the construction there? Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know where it is on the construction phasing as far as construction of the Sallyport, which would be the kind of final blocking of that alleyway, of the driveway.
That will be in phase 2 as we describe the envelope, if you will, of the building. So it'll be towards the middle of the overall construction timeline.
Okay. Let me ask a sort of a related question, and it goes to the security on the site, not so much with regard to Department of Corrections, prisoners, or that sort of a thing, but just the general presence of the Department of Public Health, public safety. What sort of public safety force will be on the site, and will they patrol the perimeter in vans or on foot? How will that work? And is there any ability of that force to enforce the anti-idling rules?
Well, they can certainly do that. With the Department of Corrections assistance. The campus police do walk the property. They have a full security force, if you will. I think there's 40 members or more. They do not have police powers, so they're not making arrests, but they provide security for the property. Their biggest function is internal, but they also walk the property as well externally. My mentioning of the state police was just, that's the official backup, if you will. Should anything arise that requires arrest, or at least discussion with a police officer that has powers of arrest.
But presumably the Department of Public Health, Public Safety Force could enforce the anti-idling. I mean,
that's correct.
There's no need for arresting anyone. It's just a matter of.
Yeah, that's why, I mentioned when you meet the folks, well, you judge it yourself. I believe when you meet the gentlemen and gentleladies from the Department of Corrections, they're pretty serious about their business. And, if they tell you they're not going to be idling there, and if somebody violates that rule, I would not want to have to answer to them for that. But we would also have the cameras, and we would also have our own campus police on the property as well, David. Thanks for pointing that out.
I don't see anyone's hand raised or any questions in the chat. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point?
Oh, sorry, it's Patrick. Just another quick question. Was it ever explored, the idea of renting spaces in the parking garage that abuts the Sallyport?
Well, it has not been. Just frankly, there's been no discussion about that. I'm not even sure if the vans could fit in. I'm trying to remember, because I used to park.
I think I solved the problem.
I used to park in there all the time. I'm not sure that the vans would be able to fit, to be honest with you, in the DOB garage. But we'll certainly ask that question. Thanks.
And then I guess the other thing I would just bring up, since we're piling all this stuff on, is another consistent problem, since we're talking about idling, is actually idling on East Brookline Street too, of ambulances or other vehicles. So we'd certainly want to, I think, address that. And will the Shattuck Hospital accommodate, you'd mentioned that there's no, the ambulance bay in front is not a emergency room ambulance bay. Is there an emergency room at the hospital that will accommodate? There's no.
The hospital.
Okay.
You know, it just, you know, for me, when I was at BMC for 20 years, a major concern that I had heard a lot from Connie Packard, whom I think you probably know, and other folks on staff, was that people were very concerned, particularly when the East Newton Pavilion closed, that there were a lot of these vans traveling the neighborhood. So to be honest, I thought having a parking area for them might be a positive in the general community, because they won't be parking on the streets, the side streets. They won't be traveling the side streets while they wait for their prisoners to return. Just a comment.
Frank, you mentioned you mentioned a few minutes ago, I think, that discussion, somebody had raised the question of the parking spaces in the Naval Blood Lab building or whatever it is, about, you know, those spaces there. And you had said something about it wasn't clear what was going to happen with that building. Discussions were ongoing, which I took to mean discussions between you and its owner, which I presume is BMC. Is there any scenario where you might be able to acquire the use of those spaces?
We're not sure yet, David. That's why I mentioned it that way. I think we had heard that BMC may be making a presentation to the community sometime soon about what their plans in that area are. And we expect to hear from them around that same time. We've been talking with Bob Biggio, the Vice President for Facilities. But that has been a discussion. What do you guys intend there? What do you have there? But there's nothing solid. So all we wanted to present to you tonight what we could do and what we have in the plans right now, barring other solutions, because we don't have other solutions yet.
But I think what I guess what I'm getting at is I think what I'm hearing from this meeting on the community side is that there is a desire, or maybe even a directive, that you try to acquire the use of those spaces in preference to eliminating the green space that as the current plan calls for. I guess our hope would be that you proactively pursue that.
Thanks, David. But that'll also get on the potential list for trying to mitigate this obvious sore point for a lot of abutters, obviously, from tonight's call and prior conversations.
And I'm seeing in the chat a couple of, well, here's a question to start. Who owns the air rights over the loading dock?
Boston Medical Center.
Right. And I think there's actually a plan to construct a building there at some point or at least a potential plan to construct a building there at some point in the future. Is that correct, to your knowledge?
Well, to my knowledge is that it's been under consideration in the past, David. Right. But I think in all honesty, I'd rather not conjecture about what they're going to present to you guys, to the neighborhood soon. Right. My understanding is they're going to address some of those issues with the neighborhood soon. I don't even know how they're going to address them, to be honest.
Right. I think what they did is they put it into their most recent institutional master plan as a possibility on like the 10-year time frame. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. The alley that's between East Brookline, that runs along the side of the lot at 109 and the blood bank, that is an alley, correct? Isn't it? It's not. I know it's gated in front, and that was done at my request years ago because it was being used in terms of drug activity and prostitution. Put it out there, and I had asked BMC if they would be kind enough to shut that off in order to prevent that problem continuing. And so I was just wondering if you are aware that is a drivable fire lane.
Yeah, we recognize, Cinda, that is our owned property. the driveway out to East Brookline behind the Naval Research Building. I didn't know, quite frankly. Someone asked me the other day who had put the gate up. So that's a answered the question for some of us. Thanks, BMC put it up for that purpose. So, you know, that'll be part of how we deal with construction and vehicles and keeping them off of the street and all of that. I don't have any real plans to address to that that can address that right at the moment, but I am aware, and the team is aware that that is our property.
That if in fact, since it is a fire lane, you really should not be parking cars in that area.
I agree.
Correct?
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Frank, somebody else is asking in the chat, could the city be approached about taking the parking spaces on East Newton Street to reserve them for the DOC vans?
I'd be happy to do that and have someone look into that. I don't know the answer. We have not spoken to the city about that possibility either. So we have a few. Thank you. There's a lot of great ideas for us to follow up on. DOB garage, what might happen down at the lot on the other end beside the DOB garage, and now this question about the on-street parking.
Anyone else have a question or a comment?
Yes, this is Joel again. Just, in terms of the area labeled terrace above, is that the only outdoor space that will be allocated to? Is it prisoners? I don't know how to, you know, if I'm phrasing it right, but is that?
No, it's really just for patients. The Department of Mental Health patients have a statutory right to fresh air. It's actually codified. But our patients also enjoy fresh air, and it's a nice spot up there for them to be able to access, you know, above street level. We actually are going to have portable gas brought there for our vent patients if they want to enjoy the sunshine for the few hours of the day they can get it, or their families visiting in nice weather or something like that. So the designs on that, when we get into, you know, the more robust presentation of kind of the inside design, this was kind of the terrace is thought of more as inside because it's part of the operations of the hospital. I know it's outside, but so we'll certainly show that. We'll show you pictures of it. We'll show you what our thoughts are about which patients are going to be there, how often they're going to be there. They'll be utilized almost all day long by the Department of Mental Health, at least most of that terrace, as they do in a very small fresh air area over in Jamaica Plain now that they utilize for this purpose.
Okay, so maybe I'm just not distinguishing. This building is going to house both inmates and sort of
There's three populations. There's the Department of Public Health patients, which are, you know, anybody who needs us. Usually it is those folks that are economically disadvantaged, heavy populations from the communities of color, people that either have comorbidities, multiple comorbidities, some post substance use disorder issues, and other comorbidities. That's a DPH patient population. The DMH patient population, and again, we'll get into this more in the community meeting because I know the larger community asked these questions before as well. But the DMH patients, you know, we have DMH patients and have for years right across East Newton Street in the Fuller building. But the patients that we get are court ordered for the most part, not all, but for the most part for the inpatient units that we have. And they are there for longer periods of time. Some have complex physical health needs as well, but basically they're there for psychiatric care on the psychiatric units. There's about 115 beds, both in Jamaica Plain and planned for the East Newton Pavilion that are Department of Mental Health beds. And there are 31, correct me if I'm wrong, team, but there are 31 DOC inpatient beds in the DOC units. So those are the three populations that we have by three different agencies, if you will. Under our general care, we are Joint Commission accredited. We are the Joint Commission accredited agency. So we control, run the hospital in concert and in cooperation and collaboration with our sister agencies, Department of Mental Health and the Department of Corrections.
And as Frank just said, when we do have our community meeting in several weeks, we expect that we'll have a lot more discussion about that issue and how the hospital will actually operate day to day and what that'll look like and its effects.
This is Peter Houston, and I just wanted to, echo what everyone said about the parking. And another thing is the neighborhood is sort of coming, it's coming together. We just had people had a christening here, and we were having families and stuff like that. And I wonder if you could mention about the safety. I know that the Shattuck, in Franklin Park is sort of, flanked by open spaces and sort of, police areas. And so I was curious if, and, we do have the ICE facility here, and we have, D4, which, I know holds prisoners. But I wonder if you could mention something about the safety that would make us feel better, or is that something that we'll talk about later?
Well, I'd rather have the safety people talk about the security plans for the area and what they do now and in the future. But in general circumstance, just so you know, Peter, it's, we have the campus police, we have the state police, we have DMH officers as well right across the street. And so occasionally they'll be in the East Newton Pavilion. And we have the DOC corrections officers there all the time, 24/7, that are manning the corrections unit. So you have a lot of security officers there from different agencies. Their responsibility is not the general outdoor footprint. So I don't want to mislead you by making you think that. It is the responsibility of the campus police and in backup, the state police for the outside of the building. And we, as I mentioned, not only to provide security for ourselves and the neighborhood, but direct security for all of these populations that we're talking about. You will be, I would hope, impressed with the security camera coverage and who is going to be manning those stations to monitor those security cameras, because it's a pretty robust program that's being developed, but it is not ready for prime time yet, to be honest.
Anyone else? So first of all, Frank, thank you. And thank you to everyone from DCAMM and from the architectural team for the presentation. A couple of things in closing. Can you walk us through kind of what to expect, what residents or neighbors should expect over the next 6 months, say, in terms of what's going to happen when? And I know you did it at the outset, but just to recap that. And the other thing I'd like to ask is that we put together some sort of mailing list or email list and I think that, for lack of a better way, maybe what we'll start with is to ask people who are interested to contact us at Blackstone Franklin Square Neighborhood Association and give us your name, your email, and your address, if you would. And we'll start to compile that, at least to make a first cut. And I've put our email address in the chat, or you can just go to blackstonefranklin.org, our website, and find it there. But that'll at least get us a start on having some kind of a list, so we can have some kind of ongoing communication.
We've been having we've been trying to create one, but it's only been people that have taken the opportunity to reach out to us that we've been able to garner email addresses from. I did reach out to BU, they didn't share. I think they were worried about sharing without everybody confirming that it was okay to share. And I get it, I get that. I just wanted to mention, at the bottom of the slide that you see in front of you now, which is the timeline, maybe Gordon or someone on the team can address this, because these are construction timeline questions, not the things that I would be most familiar with. But on the bottom of that, you will see that we maintain, Department of Public Health, a Shattuck relocation website. You know, we're going to make that more and more and more robust. We're going to have it interactive. But we're going to have an opportunity on that site. I think we added it this week already for people to kind of register their emails so that they can be regularly reached out to. But we're going to try and encourage everyone to start using that as kind of the immediate source of, you know, what's happening at the moment, or source of longer term presentation of PowerPoints. We would post the PowerPoint on there so you could always go back and look at it again, or whatever. That's going to be kind of where we're going to try and centralize all of that as a repository for all these activities. So Gordon, do you have someone that will address the timeline a little bit more detail to answer David's question?
Sure, I can take that, Frank. So I would comment that this is a renovation project, so it's not new constructions. So we expect this to be a minimal impact as possible on the neighborhoods. There's no deep piling, as an example. We're working this with Gilbane, and we'll talk to this in more detail at the next meeting. But I think, David, you mentioned the first 6 months. So we start in July. We have some work in the plaza area, and we don't expect to work ourselves away around to the alley until October. And that's to repair some of those areas that you mentioned about. There's utilities underground there that are old, that need to be repaired to avoid any type of disruption that's unplanned. And that's pretty much what you would see in the next 6 months, is those first 2 squares, some demolition interior, but some site utility improvements in the plaza and some site utility improvements in the alley. And that's pretty much all that's planned for the next 6 months to take us through the summer.
Okay, thanks. And with regard to the alley, are people going to lose access to their parking spaces for any period of time?
That's highly likely. We're working on mitigation plans to propose at the next meeting. So we're looking at how will we do that? How do we minimize that impact? I know we had some borings in the alley, and we offered some parking in the adjacent garage as a mitigation means. So we're looking at those opportunities as well. We're working closely with Gilbane to make sure we look into the details now that the design is being finalized, so we can make sure we mitigate and minimize the disruption to the people that access that
Okay.
for parking.
Okay, and it sounds like that's a good topic for the next meeting, but do you anticipate it'll be a matter of a few days of loss of access, or a couple of weeks, or what kind of number?
I'd like to make sure I had the details so I don't go off in the wrong direction, but we won't be there until October. That's why, on purpose, so we can make sure we have plenty of time to look at what mitigation looks like and what's the overall impact.
And Frank, one last thing before we adjourn. So it seems like the biggest single takeaway here is a very great concern around the parking arrangements and the desire to see alternatives not only explored but attained, ideally. And so, a few thoughts were laid out. You said you would take them under advisement, try to pursue them. So when can we next reconvene where you'll be able to sort of speak meaningfully to what can be done on that front?
Yeah, I would think it's going to be, just trying to think of the different agencies we're going to have to get in touch with and discuss. BMC, certainly City of Boston, others. I don't know, it's probably going to be 3 or 4 weeks before we had sufficient meat to come back, not just about that, but about the other questions that were raised tonight as well.
Okay.
So sometime in mid-May, late May, if that would be okay. If you guys think it should be much sooner, let me know, and we'll try and accommodate. I'm just trying to respond to the question at the moment,
No, I think sort of a month-ish seems reasonable. But let's aim for that, not too much longer.
Yeah.
So kind of mid-May, and we'll do the community meeting that hasn't been scheduled yet, but that, I think we've been talking about that as being something that would happen in May or May-ish also. Is that?
Yes.
Is that feasible?
Yeah, we're trying to work through that as well.
Okay.
Line for DCAMM and the architects as we transition from what I mentioned in my opening about the design development phase to the construction phase. That's a ton of work for DCAMM to make that transition. Those packets have to go out to the construction companies, all of those details that, thank goodness, I don't have to worry about, but certainly Gordon and his team do. So it complicates it in the background a little bit as far as people's attention span, but I will certainly act on all ways tonight. And quite frankly, I welcome, people either to contact me directly, to contact through you, David, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other suggestions? And, if we want to have a little powwow about questions specific just to the parking, because people feel more immediately, we can talk about that as well and get some answers from any of the suggestions that are made.
Hi, this is Marie again. Just before we go, can we make a plan for some maybe DCAMM to deal with that green space now? Start taking care of it because it's really offensive looking.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about it again just the other day, the team and I. So we're going to try and get that cleaned up. Just cut back a little bit as you had recommended, Marie, and cleaned up a little bit to make it a little bit more presentable.
As you know, I've been asking you for 3 years. It's been 3 years.
Well,
now they're dead, and now it's horrible looking, and now.
I wasn't here 3 years ago, but
well,
I'm sure you have something.
I'll send you the email I sent you. But
right.
It's offensive. It shows a lack of care towards us. That's it.
It's definitely something that if we could get it dealt with in the next few weeks, that would really be appreciated. And I think the notion here is to get it cut back enough so that A, looks better, and B, there's no longer concealment for people sleeping and that sort of a thing.
Yeah, I understand, and we will.
Yeah, I'll talk to my peers over at the and see what we can do on that.
Okay, yeah, if we could get that sooner rather than later, that would be very helpful, I think. Okay, well, good. This has been terrific. We've had really great participation. We had over 40 people, which was great. I think we had recognized a lot of people, a lot of names I didn't recognize, which is also welcome. And I think this sort of two-track system where we're going to have one set of meetings that are very abutter focused and near neighbor focused, and another set that are sort of more for the community more broadly is going to work well, because I think we really had a chance tonight to dig in at a level of detail that just wouldn't have been possible if we were trying to cover the whole horizon of issues around this. So I do really appreciate that and the level of information that you brought here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David, and thank you again for being so helpful in facilitating setting this up and getting this organized with us. We thought this was the best way to try and do it with and for the neighborhood through their local association. So it's been terrific. I want to thank our team. You've got a ton of people on here tonight. They're doing all the nuts and bolts, and they're hearing it all. And even though I did the talking for them in many circumstances, they were all paying close attention to everything that was being raised. And I want to thank all of them for all the preparatory work that they did for tonight as well.
Great, thank you. So I just, again, ask everybody who's interested in being on sort of an abutters email list to reach out to us at blackstonefranklin.org or BFSNA at blackstonefranklin.org in order to start that process. And it sounds like we'll reconvene around 4 weeks from tonight.
If I could, David, I just wanted to mention, I only just became aware of it, but Undersecretary Peters did join us about 45 minutes ago. So he's been monitoring the whole conversation as well. So you really had Commissioner Gladstone, Undersecretary Peters, top folks on the call tonight hearing all of this as well. So
that's great. And I also want to acknowledge that Corey Asman, who's Representative John Santiago's great aide, was here also. I think he stuck it out the whole way. So that was appreciated for him to be hearing this information.
He is a regular caller and advocate. All of you.
Could I just make one final comment?
Yes.
This is Mark Proto. I'm on a butter. The raised planter area also needs a lot of attention. There's a lot of garbage up there, trash. I'm not sure how it gets up there, who brings it there, but that area has not had any maintenance. And I looked down on that just from my view of it, so I can see it all. So I wanted to add that to the list. And the trees the trees look very unhealthy as well. So I don't know if you're planning on keeping those trees or replacing them, but they have not had any significant care. Thank you.
Thanks. I think you had the last word, Mark. So with that, I think we'll let everybody get back to their evenings. So thank you, and we'll see everybody, or at least everybody who's interested, in about a month.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Welcome.
Bye.